loveliness so that then we can move forward, right? How's everyone doing?
Good.
I mean, it's Wednesday, so that's something, right? Just gonna get after this for a while still. But that's okay. We can do it. All right. So did I start recording? I did. Good. So go ahead and mute yourselves for right now. I'm not going to mute you all. I'm going to give you the power to do that so that that you can share here in a minute, because we are going to do a little bit of sharing with a few of you that are here this morning. Okay, so today we are talking about intros and conclusions and how we make those really strong and so forth. So if you hop into Canvas, and I don't know how many of you are on the device that you use to do work, and so if that's the case, just hold off on getting into Canvas to do this. But so we've been looking at, you know, rhetorical choices and things like that, and oh, that's not what we wanted. We've been talking about reading closely, things like that. So today we're going to talk about, now we as writers need to be aware of all of those things that affect us. So remember, we were looking at, you know, who is our audience? We're looking at historical background, ourselves, all of the things that play into what we were looking at with the other authors, we're now looking at with ourselves as authors of our writing. So, and this will disappear and the video will be there, but some of the things we're going to talk about today, key takeaways: considering your audience's familiarity with the subject and the purpose or purposes that you're trying to accomplish through your introduction. So thinking about the AP readers, they probably know quite a bit about the subject unless you're bringing in external information. But with the examples that we're going to use today, it may be that you want to assume that your reader doesn't know a whole lot. So a lot of the time in my classes, when my students are doing literary analysis or something like that, because they've been taught about giving that background information, they spend a lot of time giving background information in the introduction where I'm the audience. I've read the book. I've thought about it a lot of times, right? And so you don't need to give me, as your audience, a whole lot of background. So that's when your introduction can be pretty small. It can have your thesis, a little bit of context, maybe a tiny bit of background, but it really doesn't need a whole lot. So what we're going to do now, can you guys see this now that I went into a doc? Okay, just want to make sure that how the sharing goes. Is together we're going to do this first prompt, and then I'm going to have you guys work on the second prompt, and we'll share out some possible ideas in preparation for your assignment today, which is obviously you have a prompt and you're going to write an introduction and a conclusion. So here is possible prompt 1. Select a concept, place, role, etc., to which you believe that the term overrated should be applied. Then write a well-developed essay in which you explain your judgment. So, and I've included this really asking just because these are actual past AP prompts, and sometimes they get a little bit convoluted in the way that they're asking. So it's always good when you're looking at these to try and figure out in layman's terms, so in the way that you speak yourself, what are they asking me? So here, they're really just asking you to develop an argument about why something is overrated, and you get to decide what that thing is, and then you have to use evidence to support that. Now, we're not getting into the evidence today, right? Tomorrow, you're going to write a thesis and get some claims, and Friday, you're going to write a thesis, get some claims with evidence to support that. But today, we're just talking about your introduction and conclusion. I wrote thesis here, but it should be an entire introduction. Okay, so an argument about why something is overrated. If you have any thoughts on that, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself. What is overrated? What should we write our introduction and conclusion about? Let's see, no one has an idea. No ideas, huh?
I think we're still seeing your
Are you still seeing this other thing?
Yeah, we're just seeing what like your camera.
Oh, well, I see. Sorry, I asked and Hayden shook his head and I assumed that meant you could see this. You can see this now, right? I'm sorry, Hayden. Okay, so prompt. Select a concept, place, role, etc., to which you believe the term overrated should be applied. Then write a well-developed essay in which you explain your judgment. And then here, like I said, I included the what it's really asking, develop an argument about why something's overrated. So first, we need to figure out something that we think is overrated. What's overrated? Is McDonald's Diet Coke overrated? Is Disney World overrated? Is Paris overrated? Is sleeping in overrated? I don't know. These are all ideas. But what do we want to do? Oh, Sean.
Okay. My idea is high school football.
Oh, okay.
Controversial. Sorry, John.
It is controversial. Okay, so before we even get into our thesis, we're going to come up here with high school. Whoa. Football. I just threw that out for John. You know, why not? Is overrated. All right. Now, I have a feeling a few of you are going to disagree, but the good news is we're not actually writing this for our assignment today. We're just going to do this for today. Okay, so if we were going to actually write an argument that high school football is overrated, we have to assume that because I'm going to put myself in your shoes because I'm not actually a high school student. I know you're shocked, but we need to assume that we, the author, as a high school student, are going to have different experiences than those who are reading it, right? Especially if you think about the fact that you're going to have a lot of middle-aged English teachers grading this, right? And middle-aged is older than me. Just keep that in mind. So thinking about that, what kind of information do you think we would need to include in our introduction? Whoa. What kind of information would our readers need?
Are we still like raising our hands, or can we just shout it out?
You can shout it out.
Okay. I think an important thing is like how big of a crowd it brings to each game.
Okay. Suggesting that possibly the crowd is small? Or do you think that too many people come for what's happening?
Yeah.
Okay. And these are actually good pieces of support, you know, so maybe you, as part of your claim, you would talk about these different things. But thinking about, you know, someone that's not in high school right now and trying to help them understand how, you know, football is this big part of the community, of the, I don't even know how to say it, but essentially just in high school, football is a big deal, right? And the question is, should it be? And based on what Sean is suggesting, we're going to argue that it shouldn't because it's overrated, right? John doesn't look too mad yet, and Gabe's not even looking at the camera, so, and we can't see Jacob's face, so hopefully they're not gonna, you know, hate you forever, Sean. Okay, so we need a thesis statement to go with this. Essentially, we have one, but it's written really simply, high school football is overrated, right? So now we need to put this into more thesis-esque writing. So I'm just gonna walk you through my thought process here. When thinking about something that should be given the label overrated, high school football immediately comes to mind. So I don't know if you see what I did here. It's not even actually saying high school football is overrated. It's saying, I think it should have the label. I've taken myself out of there, but you can still kind of see the author in there. Do you see that? When thinking about something that should be given the label, which is me essentially saying, when I think about this, but not saying when I think about this, or I think that, right? So that would work as a possible thesis. Now, there are a lot of other really great things that you could do to make that thesis a lot stronger, but we're not going to worry about that right now, because we need to write an introduction and conclusion, right? So thinking about our audience, the AP graders. High school is a time of growth and development, full of friendships. That was spelt wrong. And social pressure. Added to that is the the difficulty that comes with how would we say this, guys, with different social groups in a high school setting without directly quoting Mean Girls.
I think you should quote Mean Girls. I think that'd be pretty strong.
Well, I can't remember exactly how it goes. But essentially, right, added to that is the difficulty that comes with different social groups in high school, especially, wow, the popularity of sports, maybe, right? And then we could say, when thinking about something that should be given the label overrated, high school football immediately comes to mind, as it is overrated. Okay, so I just added that last thing to make it a little bit stronger there. And we could even say the prestige and attention that comes with being a high school football player is, I mean, we would want to say something about how they don't deserve it or something like that, right? So, and again, I'm not making a commentary. We're just writing a good argument on the topic that we picked. Okay, so the prestige and attention that comes with being a high school football player is, I'm going to say this really poorly, but too much for what they actually accomplish. How's that? Sean, you like it? Does it work?
Yeah, just like the bigger thing for me is that it overshadows so many other programs and like clubs in the school.
And I think that would definitely be a claim that you would need to talk about in one of your, body paragraphs would be something like that, right? But because you feel like that's really, really important, right? We can actually change this. It's too much for there. And it overshadows the other extracurriculars and academic achievements. How's that? All right, cool.
Perfect.
So is it a really long paragraph, this introduction? It's really not, right? It's actually, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. Now, a couple of my sentences are Nathaniel Hawthorne-esque in that they're kind of long, but you can see how we put that together, right? Okay, so, and then our conclusion, we would need to come back to that same idea, right? And we would need to just reword it a little bit differently. Now we would maybe bring up some of the really good points that we've suggested throughout the other writing that we did in our body paragraphs, right? And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at writing that conclusion right now. You just want to make sure that you really bring home that so what, right? So what could a really big so what be? And I think that, when we talk about what it's asking us, so we have to go back to the prompt. We have to not get away from this. It's developing an argument about why something is overrated. So what? Why does it matter that football is overrated? Well, it matters because this is, oh gosh, guys, sorry. Football being such a large focus in high school creates see, now you know, even when you do this a lot, you have to pause and think. So that should hopefully make you feel a little better. So football being such a large focus in high school, which was all what I was going to replace with the word this, right? So instead of using this, I just came out and actually said it, creates a, let's see, suggests that football is more important than all the other things that happen in high school, which it isn't, and thus it is overrated. Boom, right? Okay, so that just kind of helps with that so what. So the rest of your conclusion, you would need to make sure that you develop it a little bit more, go into it, but here we have that that so what idea that's really important to have in your conclusion. Okay, we have another prompt to look at together, and I want you guys to, I'm not going to write this. You guys have to write this, okay? So possible prompt 2. Write to your school board explaining what you mean by creativity and arguing for or against the creation of a class in creativity. Now, this is pretty convoluted the way they've asked this, so I actually feel like it's really important to try and figure out what they're asking you. And maybe you do that as part of your outline before you even dive into figuring out what your thesis and your claims might be. But, it's like, what is creativity? What do you mean by creativity? And why should you have or not have a class in creativity? So what it's really asking you is to develop an argument that takes a position on what creativity is and whether or not you should have a class for that. Okay, so it could mean something very different for each of you, because some of you are into art and photography and music and theater and all of these different things that might be creative elements. Maybe somebody's into graphic design, right? So are those creative? And are they creativity, or are we looking more holistically at the idea of creativity? So you got to think about all of that when you put it together. Okay, so we need a topic, I guess. What do you think? You can just shout out. That would be fine. And Sean can't have all the good ideas. Somebody else, other people have to help. Especially because I see at least like 6 of you that do lots of very creative things. So
I think creativity isn't really something that can be taught, because I think everybody is creative in their own ways. Like somebody making art is could be their form of creativity, but somebody playing a sport or something like that could also be a different form of them letting out their creativity. I don't really think it's something that can be taught in a class.
okay. And so in that, you would need to, so you would define creativity as some innate ability to create through a medium which is specific to an individual or something like that, right? I kind of just pulled that out, so it's a little bit weird, but kind of, does that kind of cover what you were talking about, Abby? All right. So the idea that it really can't be taught, it's innate to each of us, and we all have very different ways of showing that creativity. And so then as a second part of that, Abby, would you make the argument that we shouldn't then have a class that's based on creativity? Or because you're talking more holistically about the idea of creativity and less about like having photography and theater and things like that, right?
Yeah, I just think it would be hard to make a class about creativity when it's so different to each person. Like I don't really know what would be taught in that class.
Right. Holistically. Maybe I didn't spell that right. Probably I didn't. Oh, look, there's no W. But like the whole person, anyway. Based on the idea of creativity holistically, it wouldn't be beneficial to have a class. Okay, so that's one possibility, right? Now we could always define creativity as, I guess the stereotypical means of creativity, right? Art and thought, maybe. And that would need more development there. But if that was the case, then we would be talking about photography, art, drawing, graphic design. We'd be talking about writing. We'd be talking about maybe a sociology class even, right? Because we'd be talking about that idea of thought, or philosophy, I suppose. But you can see how it gets to be a number of different things that we could include there that might be worthwhile classes of having. So there's both ways. Which one do we want to do? Do we want to go with Abby's idea? I see some heads nodding.
Yeah, I think Abby's is good.
Okay, let's do it. So thesis. I mean, we could take it a lot from our topic there, right? So maybe we'll just see what that is. Creativity can't be taught as it is an innate. Do you guys know what innate means? Do we need to define that word? We're good? Okay. An innate ability to create through a medium which is specific to an individual. Thus, and we'll throw that in there, a class based on creativity wouldn't be very useful. Something like that? Yeah? Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay. All right. Sean, you look so bored there with the guitar on the wall. Okay. And so then here, I think we would need to make sure we spend some time in this paragraph explaining that definition of creativity, right? Because that's going to heavily color the way that we then discuss it. As we looked at even just these two different options here, that there's really kind of a wide spectrum with the idea of creativity. So you need to explain some creativity, thinking about the AP readers. You might talk about the fact that in Abby's example, that includes sports. It includes really any way, and that's what the medium and the individuality would touch on, right? That they can be creative. That, maybe there are certain football players or other sports that they get really ingenious in the way that they decide to run a play, or they can read the field really well and do certain things based on that might be actually a part of the creativity. So you'd want to make sure that you touch on that in your introduction, because that's really going to color the way that you talk about it in the body of the paper. Okay, so that is all we wanted to do today, was just talk a little bit about how do we, kind of start thinking about some of these things, start thinking about, oh, sorry, I forgot we have to new share, go back, nope, to here. Okay, so your assignment today is to write an article, but you're just going to do the intro and conclusion for the school newspaper. So I know Sean and Emma, you guys have probably done this in real life, maybe not this prompt, but for the school newspaper. But so you're going to do, let's see. Did I give you your topic over here yet?
Yeah, it's about social media.
Yeah, where is it? Oh, right
Your
there.
assignment.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. Write an article about social media for the school newspaper. So just the intro and the conclusion. So you need to think about what your audience knows about social media. And this is going to be really different than the ones we were just looking at, because we were just thinking about the AP graders. And now you're going to switch and think about high school students. They know a lot about social media. So are you going to need to spend a whole lot of time giving them background on that? Not really, right? Determine whether or not your audience is familiar with the subject. Turns out, like I said, they are. And then third, your introduction might juxtapose, and it doesn't have to, but it might talk about, so juxtaposing is placing or dealing with close together for contrasting effect, right? Different things, an anecdote or a story, of typical social media use that your audience is familiar with, and then share a relatable statistic that might surprise them. So this is not what you have to do, but this is giving you an idea of how, when there is a subject that your audience really knows a lot about, how you can still make it interesting, is by saying, you know, Jerry, maybe don't use Jerry, but I guess for the school newspaper, you totally could. Jerry finds himself 3 hours later still scrolling through, not Facebook, because we already established that Facebook is not something you guys look at, but, you know, scrolling through TikToks and, you know, snapping back and forth. And I don't even know if that's the correct way you say it. I'm sorry. But anyway, you know, spending 3 hours on social media, is that super unheard of? When you're like, oh, wow, I just was on there for a really long time. Maybe 3 hours is too much, but you know what I mean? Like, getting lost in the rabbit hole of social media isn't that hard to do. And so then, so making sure that you, oh, what am I doing? Oh, Nick, hello. Making sure that you address, you know, give them kind of a story, but then maybe you throw out a statistic. Maybe in your research for this article, you found out that social media is highly tied to depression or anxiety or comparative things. And so you bring that in right after your story. So then it's kind of like, oh, okay. So even though we can all relate to the fact that we get stuck in this rabbit hole of social media, it may not be mentally healthy for us or something like that. So then you could get into it, unless you want to talk about the positives, right? And then you would want to bring in something that would be positive to help and jump off from that point. So it really doesn't matter, and you don't have to write it that way, but your whole job today is an introduction and a conclusion, social media, for the high school newspaper, keeping in mind your audience, your peers. Okay? All right. It is really good to see you guys. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? No. All right. This is mostly 8th period. And then Nick.
Hi.
Nick and Jacob. Jacob's here. And Carson. Sorry. There's a few of you.
You keep
Oh,
forgetting
and
Matt.
Madison. Sorry, Madison. William wants to come say hi to you really quick, so.
Hello.
Say hi. It was really quiet. All right. Well, that is all I have for you today. So hopefully the assignment won't take you very long. I'm trying to, you know, give you some assignments that are a little bit shorter and chiller as well. So, all right, guys, have a great Wednesday.